crash in Paris ended a life, but not the questions. Decades later, AI technology returned to the scene of Princess Diana's final moments, scanning every inch of the car that carried her into legend. When the trunk finally surrendered its secret, a sharp gasp echoed through the lab. "We've never seen anything like this," an investigator whispered, his voice breaking. "What the machine uncovered is more than a lost object. It is a revelation powerful enough to shake the royal world to its core. The discovery has left millions speechless." What exactly was waiting inside that silent trunk? The code in Diana's trunk. The night in London was still, the air inside the laboratory cool and sharp. Rows of silent machines blinked with tiny lights that looked like restless stars. In the heart of this quiet room stood a tall glass chamber filled with wires, screens, and the soft hum of a brand new forensic AI. The engineers called it Horizon. It was designed to see what human eyes had missed, to dig into forgotten corners of old evidence and bring the faintest traces of truth back to life. Inside the lab, a small team of specialists watched their monitors. Their faces were pale with the glow of the screens, their fingers moving quickly over the keys. They were feeding Horizon its next challenge, the final evidence from one of the world's most painful nights. Far away in Paris, deep inside a cold police archive, a storage door groaned open for the first time in decades. Dust fell like tired snow as the lock gave way. Behind it stood a single steel container holding what remained of a black Mercedes. The car had not seen daylight since 1997. It was the very vehicle that carried Princess Diana on the night of the crash. Time had turned its metal dull and lifeless. The trunk, twisted and scarred, looked like a silent witness that had kept its secrets for nearly 30 years. Officers in protective gloves wheeled it out under harsh lights. Cameras recorded every move, but the moment felt strangely private, as if history itself was holding its breath. The trunk was transported to London, where Horizon waited. Engineers guided robotic arms to lift the lid, scanning every inch with lasers fine enough to read the shadow of a fingerprint. The AI worked quietly at first, drawing slow lines across the battered surface. The lab was so silent that the soft whir of its sensors sounded like a heartbeat. Hours passed with nothing unusual. Then, a sudden flicker appeared on one of the monitors. A thin red line cut across the screen like a warning. "That's odd," whispered one technician, leaning closer. The AI had paused mid-scan, its circuits humming faster than before. Data filled the screen in a rush of symbols and numbers. At first it looked like static, but the machine was not confused. It had found something. "Section Delta, interior trunk wall," the lead engineers read aloud, her voice trembling despite her training. The AI highlighted a faint outline, a tiny compartment hidden deep inside the wrecked metal. A hush fell over the room. The fragments were not random. They formed a shape the AI could not yet explain. Alongside them was a faint chemical residue, a signature of something once sealed and then broken long ago. The readings were delicate, but unmistakable. One of the younger engineers broke the silence. "This was never in the official files," he said, his eyes fixed on the glowing data. The lead scientist only nodded. "Run a secondary scan. Verify everything Horizon obeyed, tracing the compartment again with slow precision." The results came back identical, confirming the first alert. The hidden space existed. Whatever had been placed there decades ago had left its trace. Far beyond the lab walls, the world began to stir. A journalist with connections inside the Paris archive received a whisper about the reopened storage unit. A single sentence leaked to a late-night newsroom. "An AI has flagged a stunning anomaly in Princess Diana's car trunk." Within hours, messages spread across social media like a sudden storm. Headlines lit up phones and televisions. What did they find? Why now? Crowds gathered outside the laboratory gates, cameras flashing in the dark. Some people carried flowers, others carried signs demanding answers. Memories of 1997 rushed back, the grief, the questions, the endless theories. Now, after so many years, a machine had spoken and the old silence was breaking. Inside the lab, the team tried to ignore the noise of the outside world. They focused on the screen where Horizon displayed its final analysis. A single line of text glowed against the black background. It was not a simple reading of chemicals or metal. It was a string of numbers and letters arranged like a code. The engineers stared at it, each symbol sharp and deliberate. The AI had condensed all its findings into this cryptic message, pointing to something it called a sealed unit. It offered no explanation, only a location, inside the trunk. The lead journalists exhaled slowly. "It wants us to open it," she said. Her words hung in the cool air like a challenge. Decades of unanswered questions pressed against the moment. Somewhere inside that battered Mercedes lay a secret that had slept for nearly 30 years. Now a machine had whispered that the time for silence was over. Outside, the city lights flickered across the Thames. News vans lined the street, their cameras aimed at the hidden lab. Reporters spoke of history being rewritten, of a discovery that might change the story of Diana's last night forever. The team prepared their tools with careful hands. The air smelled of steel and dust, but beneath it was something harder to name, a mix of fear, excitement, and the quiet ache of memory. The last night in Paris. Paris glittered beneath a velvet sky, its streets glowing with golden lamps and restless camera flashes. August 1997 carried a soft warmth, the kind of evening that promised laughter and danger in the same breath. Inside the elegant Ritz Hotel, Princess Diana sat with Dodi Al-Fayed, their quiet smiles wrapped in a private world. The dining room was alive with murmurs and the clinking of crystal, yet their table felt like a small island of calm. Diana's laugh, light and warm, floated across the room and softened the edge of a day that had been shadowed by endless eyes. Outside, those eyes waited. Paparazzi lined the narrow streets, their cameras ready to explode at the first movement behind the hotel doors. The buzz of their whispers drifted through the night air, mixing with the faint hum of car engines. They had followed Diana and Dodi all day, from the sparkling shops of Paris to the quiet corners of the hotel, each flash capturing a story that no one truly understood. In a nearby office, royal aides tracked every movement. Phone calls came and went with clipped voices. They checked flight schedules, read updates from private security, and calculated routes through the city. A single lamp burned above their maps as they tried to stay one step ahead of the relentless press. Every decision carried a quiet urgency. Downstairs, the driver, Henri Paul, prepared for the evening's final journey. He spoke in low tones with the bodyguards, their words drowned beneath the hum of hotel machinery. There was a plan, a quick exit through the back to escape the waiting crowd. The idea was simple: avoid the crush of cameras, take a safer road, and give Diana and Dodi a few precious moments of peace. Inside the suite, Diana leaned close to Dodi. Her voice was gentle, her smile soft, but her eyes carried a flicker of worry. "It's madness out there," she said, glancing toward the curtained windows. Dodi reached for her hand, a quiet promise that they would soon leave the chaos behind. The evening unfolded like a fragile dream. Cameras flashed beyond the hotel walls, their bursts of light slicing through the darkness. A stranger's phone rang, sharp and sudden, cutting the stillness of the hallway. Somewhere, a whispered conversation ended too quickly. The small sounds built a quiet tension that no one could name, a feeling that the night itself was holding its breath. When the hour came to leave, the group moved swiftly. Diana wore a simple black dress, her hair shining under the hallway lights. Dodi walked beside her, protective and calm. Bodyguards guided them through the hidden exit where a sleek black Mercedes waited like a shadow. The air outside smelled of rain and exhaust. "Ready?" Henri Paul asked, his voice low but steady. The doors closed with a muted click, sealing them in a fragile cocoon of leather and metal. The plan was to outsmart the photographers by switching cars. Another vehicle left the main entrance as a decoy, drawing the crowd of flashing lights away from the hotel. For a moment, it worked. The Mercedes slid into the Paris night, its headlights cutting through narrow streets. But the city did not stay silent. A roar of engines rose behind them. Motorbikes appeared like ghosts in the rearview mirror. Cameras clicked in the darkness, their flashes bouncing across the windows like small explosions. The chase had begun. Inside the car, Diana turned slightly, her face pale in the dim light. The driver pressed forward, weaving through traffic as the bodyguard urged caution. Doty's voice was calm but firm. "Just keep going," he said, eyes fixed on the road ahead. Paris blurred into a rush of lights and shadows. Bridges and stone buildings swept past like fleeting memories. The Seine glimmered in the distance, a ribbon of silver beneath the moon. Yet the motorcycles remained, their tires biting at the silence. The tension thickened. Another phone call came through the radio, short and sharp, then cut off without explanation. The sound of engines grew louder, echoing through the empty streets. In the back seat, Diana's fingers tightened around Doty's hand. Her heartbeat matched the rhythm of the speeding car. The Mercedes approached the Pont de l'Alma tunnel, its entrance yawning like a dark mouth in the night. The road dipped sharply, narrowing beneath the weight of stone. Headlights scattered across the slick pavement. Henri Paul steered into the tunnel, the tires singing against the road. Inside, everything became a blur. A sudden flash of light. The roar of an engine is too close. The screech of tires biting hard against concrete. The world tilted in a single breath. Metal groaned like a wounded creature as the car swerved, struck the pillar, and folded into itself with a sound that split the night. Outside, Paris gasped awake. The echoes of the crash bounced along the tunnel walls, spilling into the quiet streets above. Sirens rose in the distance, slicing through the heavy silence. Cameras that had once hunted for smiles now captured only chaos. The black Mercedes lay broken under the cold tunnel lights, its gleaming surface twisted into cruel shapes. Smoke curled from the hood, carrying the bitter scent of metal and fuel. The world beyond Paris would not know for hours. In living rooms and bedrooms across continents, people slept under the gentle hum of late summer. Phones lay silent, televisions dark, but the night had already changed. History had shifted in the span of a heartbeat. Back inside the tunnel, paramedics worked with frantic hands, their voices sharp against the roar of sirens. Cameras flashed from the shadows, capturing fragments of a tragedy no one could yet name. The air was heavy with smoke, glass, and disbelief. Secrets beneath the steel. The laboratory smelled of metal and cold air, a sharp scent that clung to every surface. Under the bright white lights, the battered trunk of the black Mercedes rested on a steel table like a silent witness pulled back from history. The AI's code still glowed on the monitor nearby, a string of numbers that had led the team to a place no human eye had ever found. Now the time had come to open what the machine had revealed. Gloved hands moved with careful precision. Tools clicked against the hard surface as the forensic team traced the faint outline Horizon had marked. The compartment was small, hidden deep beneath layers of insulation and twisted steel. Every inch of metal felt stubborn, as if it wanted to keep its secrets. Sparks leapt as they cut through the final sheet, the sound of grinding metal echoing through the room. "Almost there," whispered one of the engineers, his voice barely more than a breath. At last, a thin panel gave way. Beneath it lay a pocket of darkness that smelled of rust and time. The surface was blackened as though touched by fire, yet the edges were perfect, unbroken. A hush fell over the room. Cameras recorded every movement, capturing the way the box caught the glow of the overhead lights. The lead scientist studied it closely. "No lock," she said quietly, running a gloved finger over the seamless surface, "but it's sealed from within." They worked for long minutes, using delicate tools to coax the box open without breaking its fragile walls. When the lid finally loosened, a faint metallic sigh escaped, as if the air inside had been waiting for decades to breathe again. Inside lay 3 objects, each stranger than the last. The first was a silver key, small and cold against the scientist's palm. Its smooth surface shone like moonlight, but there was no visible lock it could open. Along the edge, faint markings ran in a pattern too subtle to decipher. Time had dulled its color, but a crest still gleamed faintly on its surface, an emblem no one in the room could name. The threads were fine, almost royal, and carried the faint scent of age and dust. The third object made the room fall silent. It was a photograph, edges frayed and corners scorched. Princess Diana stood in the center, her familiar smile soft and full of life. But beside her was another figure whose face had been torn away, leaving only a shadow of what once was. The missing piece made the image ache with mystery. One of the younger technicians spoke in a trembling voice. Who would hide this? No one answered. The room buzzed only with the soft hum of machines and the quickened breath of the team. The scientists moved the items to a separate table for analysis. Magnifiers revealed nothing new. The key carried no fingerprints. The fabric's crest belonged to no known order or family. The photograph's torn edge offered no clue to the missing face. Every test returned only more questions. Outside the lab, the world refused to wait for answers. A single leaked image of the box appeared on a small online forum and spread faster than the team could react. Within hours, social media was alive with speculation. Pictures of the silver key and the half-torn photograph filled timelines and screens. Words like secret, cover-up, and truth lit across phones around the globe. Crowds began to gather. Outside Buckingham Palace, candles flickered against the stone walls. At Kensington Palace, flowers lined the gates as people whispered about the hidden box. Voices rose in confusion and anger. Some wept softly, remembering the princess who had once charmed the world. Others demanded explanations. News anchors spoke in urgent tones, their reports looping through the night. The footage of the silver key and the scorched photograph played over and over, each replay deepening the mystery. Inside the royal household, tension grew. A carefully worded statement was released within hours. It urged calm, calling for patience as experts studied the discovery. Premature conclusions, it said, may lead to unnecessary distress, but the words did little to soothe the restless public. Instead, they only sharpened suspicion. People wondered why the statement spoke of distress but not of truth. Questions multiplied in the silence left by unanswered details. In the laboratory, the team worked through the night. They scanned the key with lasers, tested the fabric for hidden threads, and magnified every grain of the photograph's surface. The machines hummed steadily, but the objects remained stubborn. No hidden code, no fingerprints, only the quiet presence of things that seemed to belong to another world. The lead scientist stood before the table, staring at the torn photograph. The missing face seemed to pull at her thoughts. Who had been standing beside Diana on the day this picture was taken? Why tear the image and seal it inside a secret compartment of a car destined for tragedy? She turned to the team. "Someone wanted these to survive," she said softly. Her words floated through the room like a quiet confession. Hours later, a reporter's voice echoed from a small television in the corner. "Crowds continue to swell outside Buckingham and Kensington Palaces," the broadcast announced. "People are demanding transparency as speculation spreads about the mysterious items found in the wreckage of Princess Diana's car." The lead scientist lowered her gaze to the silver key, its surface catching the glow of the lab lights. The crest on the fabric seemed to shimmer faintly, as though holding its silent memory. The torn photograph lay between them, an unspoken story frozen in a single frame, its secrets no longer hidden but far from understood. The key waited without a lock, the fabric carried a crest without a name, and the photograph held a face the world could no longer see. Shadows behind palace walls. London lay under a heavy night sky, the lights of Buckingham Palace glowing like quiet sentinels against the darkness. Inside the grand walls, silence ruled the endless corridors. The outside world buzzed with rumors of the sealed box, the silver key, and the faded photograph. But here the air was thicker, charged with a tension that could almost be heard. Behind closed doors, the monarchy gathered to face a discovery that threatened to unearth truths long kept in the deepest corners of history. A private chamber deep within the palace flickered with the soft glow of antique lamps. Heavy curtains muffled the sounds of the restless crowds outside the gates. Senior royals sat around a polished table, their faces pale beneath the golden light. Each carried the weight of bloodlines and centuries of guarded secrets. The first to speak was a quiet but firm voice. "We cannot ignore this," said a senior figure, their hands clasped tightly together. "The world has already seen the box. The key is real. We must be open before someone else forces our hand. The past is dangerous. Once old wounds are reopened, they will never close again." The debate unfolded like a slow storm. Some argued for honesty, fearing that silence would only breed more suspicion. Others warned of chaos, of private memories twisted into public spectacle. Words clashed in careful tones, but beneath the polished manners lay a fear that no protocol could disguise. Outside the palace walls, the world pressed closer. Crowds gathered in the dark, their candles flickering like restless stars. News vans lined the streets, voices of reporters echoing through the damp London air. Screens everywhere replayed images of the silver key and the torn photograph, each loop tightening the grip of mystery. Inside the chamber, a single knock interrupted the tense discussion. An aide entered quickly, carrying a sealed envelope. "A message from the forensic team," he said softly, placing it on the table. The lead royal broke the seal and scanned the short note. Their eyes darkened. "A man has contacted the AI lab," they announced. "A retired investigator from the Paris case." The name meant little to most in the room, but the weight of the message silenced everyone. According to the note, this man claimed he had once seen a detail in the wreckage that others had missed, a missing piece that had troubled him for years. At the time, he had been ordered to stop digging. Now, decades later, he was ready to speak. "He says the silver key matches something in London," the aide continued. "A private vault, a royal archive." The words fell like a stone into still water. A vault, a key, a lock waiting to be turned. The chamber seemed to tighten as the realization spread. The sealed box from the car was no random collection of objects. It was a message, a map pointing toward a hidden room within their walls. Somewhere in London, a door waited, and the silver key from Diana's car might be the only way to open it. "We must secure that key," said one voice, sharp and commanding, "before it falls into the wrong hands." Another royal, older and weary, shook their head slowly. "If there is something inside that vault meant for her children, do we have the right to keep it from them?" The question hung in the air, soft but dangerous. No one answered. Far from the palace, the retired investigator paced inside a quiet flat overlooking the Thames. His name was Charles Wainwright, a man whose career had been shaped by that tragic night in Paris. His hair was silver now, his face lined with years of unspoken memories. He stared at the phone in his hand, the number of the AI team glowing on the screen. When the call connected, his voice was low and urgent. "I know where that key belongs," he said. "During the first investigation, I found evidence of a compartment in London. I was told to leave it. I have regretted it every day since." The team listened carefully as Wainwright described the crest on the fabric, the faint markings on the key, and the instructions he had once been ordered to forget. "That key fits a vault beneath the royal archive," he said. "A vault marked with the same crest." "Retrieve the key before anyone else can," one insisted. "We cannot risk outsiders opening what belongs to the crown." Another voice countered with quiet defiance. "What if the truth belongs to the people?" As arguments flared, a plan began to form. Discreet agents would approach the AI team under the cover of night. They would request custody of the key, citing national security and the need to preserve royal property. The move had to be swift, silent, and beyond public notice. But the AI team, aware of the storm outside, refused to release anything without proper protocol. "This is evidence," their lead scientist told a royal emissary who appeared unannounced at the lab door. "It cannot leave our custody until the investigation is complete," the emissary pressed quietly. "You do not understand the gravity of this matter." The scientist met his gaze. "I understand it too well. That is why the key stays here." The standoff spread through whispers and coded messages. Reporters sensed movement and began circling the laboratory. Helicopters hovered over the palace gardens. Every hour brought new speculation, every headline another layer of pressure. Inside Buckingham, the tension reached a breaking point. Senior royals gathered again as midnight approached, the sound of distant chants from the crowd seeping through the thick walls. Some urged caution, others demanded action. The silver key, lying under lock and guard at the laboratory, had become more than an object. It was a test of loyalty, of courage, of the fragile line between duty and truth. One elder royal rose slowly, their voice calm but edged with resolve. "We are chasing shadows," they said. "If the key opens a door, it will open whether we run from it or not. Better to face what waits inside than let the world believe we are afraid." Their words settled like a quiet verdict. No more whispers, no more delays. The monarchy would not win by hiding. But outside the palace, others had already moved. Wainwright, restless and determined, left his flat under the cover of fog. He carried a small folder of old notes, the kind he had kept hidden for decades. His steps were steady but urgent as he made his way toward the lab, determined to ensure the key reached the place it was meant to open. Meanwhile, plain black cars slid through London streets, their windows dark, carrying silent agents tasked with retrieving the very same key. Every turn of the city felt heavy with unseen eyes. The letters beneath Windsor. A cold mist rolled over Windsor Castle as dawn struggled to break through the heavy clouds. The ancient stones of the fortress held centuries of secrets, but on this morning, the air carried a different weight. Far below the royal chambers, beyond corridors known only to a few, a team of investigators followed the faint blue glow of an AI screen that pulsed like a heartbeat in the dark. The silver key lay on the table between them, its surface catching the dim light. For weeks, it had been a riddle, its markings a puzzle of tiny lines and faint symbols that refused to give up their meaning. Now, after endless nights of analysis, the AI finally spoke in its calm, mechanical voice. "The pattern is complete," it announced. "The key aligns with coordinates beneath Windsor Castle." The room went silent. Every investigator felt the chill of those words. Beneath Windsor, a place steeped in history where vaults and passageways stretched like a hidden city under the castle's massive walls. The AI displayed a series of glowing diagrams, a map of forgotten chambers buried deep in stone. "This is no coincidence," whispered one of the team members. "The photograph and the key were meant to guide us here." The investigators were led through narrow stairways and iron doors, their steps echoing against walls older than any living memory. The air grew colder the deeper they descended. The scent of stone and time pressed around them. At last they reached a low corridor lit by a single flickering lamp. At the end stood a heavy iron door, its surface marked by a crest identical to the one engraved on the silver key. "This is it," said the lead investigator, his voice barely above a breath. They inserted the key into the ancient lock. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then came a slow, deep click, a sound that seemed to travel through the stones themselves. The door shuddered and swung open with a sigh of stale air, revealing a chamber untouched for decades. Inside, the room was small and bare, its walls lined with sealed cabinets, but in the center stood a single lockbox, polished silver, waiting in the dim light. The team approached it with quiet reverence. The same key fits perfectly into its tiny slot. The lid opened with a soft creak. Inside lay a stack of envelopes, their edges yellowed but carefully preserved. Each one bore the unmistakable handwriting of Diana, Princess of Wales. The investigators froze. Even after all the rumors, the sight of her familiar script felt like stepping back into a heartbeat that had never truly stopped. The top letter was addressed to no one. Its words, written in her graceful hand, spoke of fears that chilled the room. She described feeling watched, followed, and silenced. There were lines about conversations she believed were being overheard, about movements that never felt private. Her sentences carried both strength and quiet despair. "I am planning a new life," one passage read, "far from the shadows that have followed me. I dream of freedom, of a place where my voice will not be taken from me." Another letter spoke of her love for her sons, her hopes for their happiness, and her wish to see them live beyond the heavy expectations of the monarchy. Each word felt alive, as though she had written them only yesterday, her heart pressed into every line. At the bottom of the stack rested a single envelope sealed with wax. Across the front, in steady handwriting, were the words, "For my sons." No one spoke as they lifted it from the box. The weight of it was almost unbearable. The investigators exchanged glances, aware that this letter belonged not to them, but to the two men who had once called her Mummy. The lead investigator cleared his throat. "This must go to the princes," he said firmly. "No one else." But before arrangements could be made, the news began to leak. A message slipped through the network of technicians. A whisper turned into a headline. By the time the team left the chamber, the world outside was already stirring. Screens across London lit up with breaking news alerts. Letters of Princess Diana, discovered beneath Windsor, one banner flashed. By nightfall, the story had traveled across continents. Crowds gathered outside royal residences, candles in hand, eyes fixed on the gates. Social media is filled with messages of sorrow, love, and unanswered questions. People read the leaked fragments of her words, her fears, her longing for freedom, and felt as though she had reached across time to speak directly to them. In Paris, strangers left flowers at the tunnel where her life had ended. In New York, images of Diana lit up skyscraper billboards. In Sydney, people gathered along the harbor, their voices soft as they spoke of a woman who had touched hearts across the world. Inside Windsor Castle, the atmosphere was electric and tense. Senior royals met behind closed doors as the discovery ignited a storm far beyond their control. Some argued for immediate release of the letters to her sons. Others feared the reaction if the contents were made public too quickly. "The world has already seen enough," one advisor warned. "The rest must remain private." Another voice answered with quiet resolve. These were her words. They belonged to the ones she wrote them for. While debates swirled in royal chambers, the two princes were informed. The sealed envelope was delivered under heavy security, its wax untouched, its message preserved. Only they would know the full depth of what their mother had left behind. Outside, the crowds waited, their faces lit by candlelight and the glow of phone screens. Some wept openly, moved by the thought of Diana's love reaching beyond death. Others held signs calling for truth, their voices rising in chants that echoed against the stone walls of the castle. The investigators who had opened the chamber stood quietly apart from the noise, a story of love, fear, and a woman's desperate wish to protect her children. The day the world held its breath. Morning broke over Paris with a quiet that felt unreal. The city, usually alive with the rush of horns and footsteps, seemed to move in slow motion. Along the Pont de l'Alma tunnel, where tragedy had once struck like lightning, the air was heavy with flowers and the soft glow of candles. People of all ages stood shoulder to shoulder, their faces touched by the orange shimmer of sunrise. Some whispered prayers, others simply stared at the cold stone walls, their eyes damp with memories. Across the Channel, London woke to the same storm of emotion. Kensington Palace, once Diana's warm refuge, was now a sea of roses and handwritten notes. Children pressed small palms against the black iron gates, leaving pictures drawn with bright crayons. Young couples leaned against one another, their whispers mixing with the sound of rustling leaves. Elderly women placed trembling hands on the bars as if reaching for a presence they could almost feel. The revelations from the Windsor vault had spread like a pulse through the world overnight. Television anchors spoke in careful tones, but their voices carried an edge of disbelief. Headlines filled every corner of the globe. Diana's secret letters discovered. A mother speaks across time. Truth uncovered by AI. Screens flashed with images of the silver key, the sealed envelope, and the quiet chamber where the letters had been found. Airports, cafes, and train stations hummed with the same conversation. Strangers exchanged glances of shared wonder. Mothers hugged their children tighter. Taxi drivers turned up the radio to hear every update. It was as if the late princess, long gone from the earth, had stepped back into the present, her voice carried not by flesh but by ink and memory. In Buckingham Palace, behind walls that had witnessed centuries of triumph and sorrow, silence reigned. Within a private study, two brothers sat side by side. The sealed envelope lay between them on a small oak table, its wax unbroken, its message waiting. Prince William traced the edge of the paper with his thumb, his jaw set but his eyes soft. Across from him, Prince Harry leaned forward, elbows resting on his knees, his gaze fixed on the same envelope. Neither spoke for a long time. "She wrote this for us," Harry finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. William nodded slowly. "And she wanted us to find it when we were ready." Those few words carried the weight of decades, of unanswered questions, of nights spent wondering what their mother might have wanted to say if only she'd had more time. We are deeply moved by the love shown to our mother. These letters are a gift to us, and we ask for privacy as we read her final words. The message traveled across the globe within minutes. Crowds at Kensington Palace lowered their candles in quiet respect. People wiped their eyes, understanding that the words inside those envelopes belonged only to the sons who had lost their mother too soon. Yet the discovery did not silence the world. The AI's findings ignited debates that burned across television screens and digital feeds. Experts revisited the crash of 1997 with renewed urgency. Some argued that the hidden box and the coded key pointed to mistakes in the original investigation. Others believed the letters were not evidence of conspiracy, but a mother's private fears and hopes, finally breaking through years of silence. Talk shows filled with former detectives, forensic scientists, and historians. They dissected every image of the silver key, every blurred photograph of Diana's handwriting. Was the box deliberately hidden? Why had it remained undiscovered for so long? Could the AI's algorithms reveal more? The questions multiplied like ripples in water. But amid the noise, something softer began to rise. Instead of deepening the wound, the discovery brought a strange sense of peace. For many, the letters were not about scandal but about love. They offered a chance to hear Diana's voice, unfiltered, unbroken, and alive in ink. People spoke of closure, of finally understanding her dreams for her sons, of feeling her spirit stretch across time to comfort a grieving world. In Paris, the crowds around the tunnel grew by the hour. Young people who had not even been born in 1997 knelt beside those who had stood there on the night of the crash. White roses lay in endless rows, their petals glistening in the damp morning light. Children placed tiny paper hearts along the pavement. Strangers held hands without speaking, united by a grief that wanted no words. In London, the gardens of Kensington Palace filled with music. Someone began to sing a soft hymn, and the crowd joined in, their voices trembling but strong. Candles flickered against the palace walls, their flames dancing like small stars in the night. It was as if the world had become one great vigil, a chorus of love that refused to fade. Far from the memorials and cameras, inside the quiet AI laboratory in London, the machine that had uncovered the truth sat in stillness. The soft glow of code flickered and began to fade. Then, on the central screen, a single line appeared. Simple, clear, and haunting. Truth can sleep for decades, but it never dies. No one spoke. The sentence had not been programmed into the system. It was not part of any known function. Yet there it was, glowing in the half-light, a message from the very heart of history. A young engineer stepped closer, her eyes wide. "It's like she's speaking through it," she whispered. The others said nothing. They simply stood in silence, the hum of the servers fading into a calm that felt almost sacred. Outside, night settled over London. The streets glowed with candlelight as strangers lingered beneath the stars. Some told stories of where they were the night Diana passed away. Others simply stood in quiet reflection, their faces lit by the soft orange of flickering flames. In living rooms across the world, families gathered around screens to watch the endless coverage. Some wept openly, their tears falling for a woman they had never met but had always felt they knew. Others smiled softly, remembering her laughter, her warmth, her courage, her love flowing across the pages like sunlight. The letters spoke of hope, of dreams for their future, and of gentle warnings only a mother could give. "She wanted us to hear her," William murmured as he closed one envelope. Harry nodded, his voice steady but thick with emotion. "And now we have." They did not reveal the contents to the world. Some truths belonged only to the heart, but the discovery had already given the public what they longed for, a final connection to the woman who had changed the monarchy with her kindness and her fire. By the next morning, the AI lab stood dark and silent. Its work was complete. Outside, the first rays of dawn stretched across the city, painting the Thames in silver.